up, bro?
All right. We here live. We tapped in with an extreme paradigm shifter, a design thinker, an architect, a genius who humbly accepts that title only by the accolade other people gives him based on his results and achievements because he knows he's defined by that. But in the rebel sense, to where he doesn't want to be called genius because he knows that it doesn't always include the feminine aspect of the genius because it's, you know, attached to the patriarch more so. That represents white patriarchal intellect. So I respect you on that aspect, but you are a genius in the sense to where I need our people to recognize that you are as much of a genius the same way a person may recognize Elon Musk or Wozniak or Steve Jobs. Those names get celebrity status and title in our community. And Einstein was the first famous genius. You know, he was able to get that celebrity genius. And Einstein he didn't even do hardware. Mm-hmm. You know, he didn't do software like you. He was a thinker. Mm-hmm. And I look at it like this. I always tell people to show the world your illusions. And I mean that, like, don't chase a thing, become a thing. Mm-hmm. So, in Einstein, what he did was, he put out his thoughts and he let other people prove him wrong. And that validated his genius. Doing thought experiments, not even tangible things. So when I think about that, the average person has genius thoughts, the world just doesn't observe. Mm-hmm. And so they don't validate themselves, their genius, because the world never gets to observe their illusions of what they put out there for other people to see what's inside themselves. You've actually created tangibles. You know what I mean? Genius in the manner of the way you think and how you produce. Your ones and your zeros, your dreams and your realities. Your binary thought and your trinary thought, your multi-dimensional ability to be more. You know, so that's not even the introduction. That's not even the introduction. We live in a society that's ambitious more than aspirational. Mm-hmm. We live in a society that tries to figure out how do I gain more instead of how do I become more. Mm-hmm. In a short amount of time, and you have become more. More than the average human being in lifetimes. More than some people's family legacies have accumulated in lifetimes. And I mean that by pure production of results and the accumulation of knowledge. So, based on these entities that we validate to legitimize ourselves, in that realm, you've done it. Mm-hmm. In that realm, they stamped you. Then you were stamped by the culture. You understand me? And now you get the full stamp by everybody else being able to see, wait a minute, he's stamped by white patriarch intellect, and now he's stamped by the God-triarch intellect as well. This is powerful. This is something that I've always wanted to see. Rest in peace to, live in peace to the great, you know, Nipsey Hussle. Live in peace, because a legend is an energy that never dies. Absolutely. So when you 13 at Google, mm-hmm. you worked on the Snapchat specs, mm-hmm. you worked with Instagram, and a bunch of other unmentionables, I'm sure, that we can't always go into. Was it the Explore page?
Uber.
Yeah. Uber?
Yeah.
You know.
It's like, you know, when I was a kid, they had like the Lunchables. This is like the, you know, unexplainables. You can't really like talk about too much.
Right.
It's just enough.
Right. That's why I only throw that out there for the people. That's not what validates him for me. What validates you for me is the way you think and the synchronicity of thought, to where there's only so many interesting thinkers in the world. There's only so many interesting designers in the world. And your level of observation shows me your level of consciousness on a higher level. Carl Jung talked about it, say that, you know, when it deals with synchronicity, you know, the observer creates the observations. But if that's true, then lower conscious observer only create lower conscious observation. Higher conscious observers create higher conscious observation. Mm-hmm. So in design thinking, you observe and then you take insights. But depending on who you are, you're not going to observe everything. So your level of observation and reality of how you see things from a multi-dimensional spectrum lets me know that you're a high observer, that you're a higher conscious being. And the fact that I can observe that within yourself validates me at the same time.
Exactly.
So
I see it too.
It's a level of appreciation. And I want people to know that this is our, celebrity is a cheap word, but I just want the emphasis on who we should be paying attention to. Because we all know who the poppin' rapper is that feeds our escapism. But the ones that give us the tools of execution, the ones that has great leadership competency by showing you a role model of the goals that we should be leading towards, we not always have our eyeballs there. That's not what we're observing, and that's why our lives are not designed the best way possible. So observe, my brother. And every time people always tell me, you inspired, blah, 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 I always say, thank you for the observation, because I know you're feeding my consciousness. You're turning me into that wave. You know what I'm talking about? And I appreciate your life. So thank you for being here, brother. This has been a dream of mine since I first observed you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, bro. Mutual.
That was
been
interesting.
following everything. You've been, just been posting, just making sure I go through and support in any way possible. You had posted something, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago about sort of this idea of the conversion ratio for social media. It's like people got millions of followers, can't even move no product.
Right.
And it just shows you that life is like a stage, and it's just like a curtain. And in today's world, it's fast fashion. Life is fast fashion right now. It's like every season there's a new, dope thing. So you tapped in, bro, and that's why I've been, I don't really be even associate myself with a lot of people, but I was like, nah, we need to build, we need to sit down, because you're tapped in, bro. And your content, the world needs to, I could count, and not even from a sense of validation, but I could literally count how many times I've ever posted somebody on my page, and I was like, nah, I gotta post.
Hey, that was a big honor for me.
People gotta know. You know what I mean? Because you're God. You know what I mean? And I feel like I was saying before, the term, if you believe, whether you're religious or not, but if you believe that we came from a source, we can only be that source.
Facts.
The first law that we learn in school, as applied to conservation of mass or energy, is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only altered.
Right.
So how can we come from a source and not be the source?
Exactly.
A monkey can't make a cow.
Fact.
Monkeys always don't make even if it intermixes or whatever, it's going to make a breed of itself. It's within the DNA. So I respected you, somebody that pushed that, but not even from a narcissistic way, but awakening the human consciousness. Because I feel like my mission is to raise the vibrational and intellectual frequency of humanity. And I feel like yours is too.
Yes, sir. And
you actively live it, whereas a lot of people talk it. And you were living it. So I was like, I need to surround myself with this brother,
That's amazing accolades from someone that I respect. I want to say it like this, is that I really don't think people understand the time that we live in. And the amount of great thinkers that live within this time. And in the 30s and 40s, I believe there was those decades where a lot of great thinkers that was coming out of that time. I mean, a lot of great thinkers. I don't know what the hell was in the water at that time. It wasn't what's in our water. They had the opposite of fluoride, whatever they was putting in the water.
That's where they came from.
But if you, I deem this year the year of the keys, and by that I mean that we have all of the keys necessary in order to produce everything that we need to, in order to create all the solutions to all of the problems that we need to. And I used to say that, for every problem there's an app. And I still mean that, but I like the way you broke it down to where you say that we have to be the greatest developers instead of the greatest app users. And not only just the greatest app developers, but also the iOS of it, And that part is important because that gives us sovereignty. And I think the ultimate goal for every human being should be sovereignty, the ability to govern your own. We inherited a social contract that's supposed to serve our best interest. Freedom, justice, equality.
Exactly.
But we know that, and that social contract is what we have with the government that says, I will obey the laws, so it serves my best interest. Same thing that we do basically with corporations and big entities. They don't serve our best interest. They don't give us freedom, justice, and equality. Instead, like you said, it's an inherent bias within the iOS. It's an inherent bias within the Constitution. So when someone doesn't serve your best interest, then you have to serve your best interest. You rip up that contract. You create a new one with the people. But you're still governing yourself, but you're saying that we're going to serve each other's best interests.
Absolutely.
So those social contracts, the way I'm looking at it right now, especially through you, is the access that you give to people. Right? The access that you give to people and the permission permission for, you ask them, let me be your influencer. Because that's what we do when we influence people and we give them information. We're asking permission for us to influence them.
Absolutely.
With leadership competency. Let me be a good role model and lead you to this desired goal.
Yeah.
What do you think is the first step for us gaining sovereignty?
I feel like the first goal is ego death. And, you know, it's like, before we could build a physical operating system, 444.
That's the FOFO guy right there.
That's my number. That's my genetic number. Before we can even build a physical operating system, we need to deprogram our mental operating system. And I hear people say reprogram a lot, but before you can reprogram, you need to deprogram for the existing architecture. You know, it's like reprogramming is spraying a trash can with perfume. You got to take the trash out, empty the bag, create a new bag. And I feel like that's what we got to start with first, the acknowledgement and the ego death and acknowledgement that it's okay. We have for centuries, for hundreds of years, used another platform or whatever it might be, but the first step is acknowledging it. But people don't want to acknowledge it. It's like Neo going through the Matrix and Morpheus being like, people believe in the Matrix so much that they will do anything to protect it. Anything.
Right.
So our first step is to acknowledge it. Is to acknowledge that it's not equal. To acknowledge the biasness. To acknowledge everything. And then we can start formulating. But for us to blatantly just be like, how do we create our own? Well, we need to, before you can create the future, we need to understand the past. You know, so it's like we need to go back and see, well, how do we get to this stage? You know, for me in particular, being Ghanaian American, the first president of Ghana, his name was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. And he understood Africa, Ghana was one of the first, independent nations or independent countries to gain its independence from, colonialism in the British Empire. But in 1952, he created a STEM school. Before we hear mainstream STEM, he created the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, which is basically STEM. 1952. Ghana gained its independence in 1957. He created a tech school before the country even gained its independence to prepare the youth with the skill sets they need to be owners and not creators. And not use the created. We need to be creators and not use the created. Instead of platform utilizers, we create the platform to be utilized. And I feel like, just to answer your question, we could go on and just like, but I feel like, it's first acknowledging, and it's okay to acknowledge. It's like that's how you learn. You learn through iteration.
Right.
And for you to go to the next stop, you never go from A to Z. You go A, B, C, D, but every single action causes a reaction.
Right.
So you look back, how do we get here? How do we get to a place where, and majority of the time, it's ignorance, and it's okay to be ignorant. Contrary to popular belief, ignorance means just a lack of knowledge. Just like darkness isn't I love darkness. Darkness is simply the absence of light.
You're a dark brother, you gotta love
and a beautiful thing I love about darkness is that every single color comes from black.
Exactly.
Everything. Black is the universal color of our universe.
You know what, on that thought, when I tell people, diversity starts in the mind. And I look at the spectrum of how a person thinks. If you were to grade it like in a color, the opposite of black, of course, is white. And in that you have a spectrum of red, yellow, green, whatever. But the people that I align with is the people not just have the same skin color. It's the people that have the same mind color. And black being the original source, it means that your mind is tapped into the original source. So if I observe your mind and I realize that, oh, you have a black mind. Now, black, of course, come with many connotations, but I define all my own words for myself. Right? So when I use them and I always tell people what they mean so that you understand where I'm coming from and don't filter it through your program. So I have solidarity with individuals who have the same mind color as me. And that mind color of originality is righteousness. That mind color of the original people is our nature.
Absolutely.
So when you have that evolution mindset, because if we go with Fibonacci sequence, then we're talking about things allowing to be able to grow in a geometrical progression.
And you tapped in.
tapped into the surface.
You didn't even like go deep in. There's just so much, out there. But I completely agree with that. Like the source, the original, was black. And again, I'm like that too. I define my own words. You can take it and put it whatever comes. I have a tattoo here that says insert here. You could take whatever perception or definition you have and imply it on me, but I know who I am. I simply be.
Yeah.
In the Torah, God said, Ehe Asher Ehe, I am that which I am. And I am that which I am. So you can use whatever constructs to define me. It doesn't even touch us.
Right.
But I completely agree that the original was black, and not by color, by mindset, by righteousness, by light, good and evil. Good and evil. That's how I like to look at energies. You either have good energy or you have evil energy. Not light energy and dark energy, because we've been taught that light. It's interesting because there's so many different spectrums that we can't even see. We can't see UV rays.
Infrared.
We can't see infrared. We can't see none of these, that even other like cats, they can see like UV and stuff. And we just see visible light, which is on the end of the spectrum. So just imagine what could be achieved if we, really put that aside and really look within and started leading that conscious mind that's within us. It's because it's here, you know what I mean? Like, I tell people, like, the seeds to your the seeds to your freedom, to your sovereignty, is not in the earth, it's in you, because you are the earth and the earth is you. It's not in the earth, it's here. You just need to acknowledge that.
You gotta tap in.
You have to tap in.
You are a software and hardware guy, and I heard that from Nipsey. He said, man, this brother do software and hardware, clap it up for that. And I thought that was dope as hell, because it was teaching people how to observe and how to appreciate at the same time. And we have to teach our culture. That's part of that deprogramming. Like, oh, y'all didn't clap for this? It's not within your program to appreciate that. And it kind of gets me to the value of knowledge. And the value of knowledge, and that goes towards discipline. Those who value knowledge will have the necessary discipline in order to obtain the knowledge to achieve their goals. Many people want knowledge free is because they don't value knowledge. We will pay for food, we will pay for sex, we pay for liquor, we pay for escapism. And in those things, we don't audit their importance, their ROI, nothing when it comes to liabilities. But when it comes to assets, we become the IRS and auditing the value. And it's like, we should have the opposite. We should easily invest into assets, right? And we should be very harsh on ourselves when it's time for liabilities. And teaching people how to observe reality from an asset liability spectrum makes us produce wealth. And not just wealth in, Jay Morrison was talking about this yesterday. He was talking about how wealth is an abundance of assets that exceed your liabilities. We live in a paradigm where we have more liabilities than our assets.
Because we have so many rich people, but we don't have wealthy people.
Exactly.
And it lives within the mind. It transcends even the currency value of it.
If somebody wants to get into, and so let me get to people some tangibles. Right now, somebody's listening to you and they say, wow, this brother is smart. I can tell he tapped in on many different levels. How do I get my son to be like him? How do I get my son to have the ability to have a thought, know what information is necessary to achieve that thought, and then act out that information to execute? Where does a person start getting into tech?
I feel like the answer I would have gave 5 years ago is way different than the answer I would get now. 5 years ago, I would have been like, tap into these programming languages that were created by other people to enslave us, And now it's like, but you can use the magic carpet to fly through the matrix and break the glass ceiling and escape. You can use and manipulate once you understand that for every action there's a reaction, you can manipulate it to your advantage. So I guess the new me would say, I feel like the greatest discovery in our known existence will be the fusion of spirituality and technology.
Do you think that's where AI go take us?
Not the way it is now. And that's why we need to have the universal black mind. And that's what lacks right now. So I think now, anybody that asks me, I would say combine the theory, combine the C# and the JavaScript and the Udemy and all these coding resources, and combine it with the spirituality machines that we program, and especially given the fact that it's super biased, they will never have a soul like us. Righteousness will always have to be programmed, period. And who gets to define those metrics? And right now it's super unbalanced, you know, who gets to define those metrics. But the reason why I feel like it will come from these inner city kids that understand the black mind not from color, but from perspective and from the source, will create that technology. So I went and sat down with the minister, and he said something that like I'm going to, you know, just carry for the rest of my life.
Minister Farrakhan.
Yes, the Minister Farrakhan. And he said, you know, he said like he had been waiting on me and stuff like that for years and all of that, but he said something very important. He said, if you look at all the technologies that was created, it came from a singular demographic, and that has to be the white man. That happens to be the white man. He said, well, white isn't a universal color. And so even though Steve Jobs gave people his last name, literally Jobs, and Elon Musk is doing so much stuff, and, you know, build all of these people, look at the issues that are coming from that as a result. Because it's not a universal mindset they're thinking with.
It's fractal.
It's fractal. And it's perspective based. It's not triality, it's not a duality even. It's singular focus. It's single with intent. It's a single with mission. It's single with selfishness. It's single with advancing one specific people. So that's why we have tech bias, and that's why we have everything. But our leaders, and this is why we're shifting the mindset now. Our leaders that will take technology and flip it will have to have a universal mindset. It cannot be that I am simply doing this for black people. You're doing it for humanity in general. And in doing that, you will break down the wall and the barrier that exists. People say like, white people got 400 years on black people and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you know, you could close that up in one generation with technology as owners and not utilizers. Because like, yeah, we sound like, you know what I mean? That's all I need to connect to.
It be like hearing myself, I'm like, yeah.
What's your sign, bro?
Taurus.
I'm a Taurus.
See?
Makes
Farrakhan
sense.
and Taurus.
Yeah,
Malcolm X and
Malcolm X and
Taurus.
Taurus. That's fine.
Well, Taurus
I just got chill.
Scorpio, y'all.
Well, I mean, that's
I got chill.
That's my brother. You can get the club.
No shade. What's your sign, bro?
I said I'm a Scorpio, so they say it's only 6 signs because every sign is identical. Opposite is its sign. So Taurus and Scorpio opposite.
Wow, that's crazy.
My mom said all 3 Scorpio signs.
It makes sense, bro, because I felt connected. I was like, yo.
No, you know the Gregorian calendar?
Yep.
It's a month behind.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Now you about to get me into
Yeah, no, that's fire. That's fire right there. Because I feel like, you know, I was reading this book and it talked about past lives, future lives, and it talked about how you will keep coming back to this earth until you fulfill it's like a vessel. Your soul keeps coming back in these forms, and you meet people and you feel like, yo, like I feel like I met that person before. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's you know, when we talk about, I feel like we take things too literal when we think of the Big Bang, because I like to refer to you know, I feel like our goal is to get back to 0 dimensions, where all the dimensions existed as one. And you know, once that catalyst happened, the universe has been expanding to this day faster than the speed of light. If the universe is expanding right now, we can, quote unquote, in the 3rd dimension, never, I don't use the word never impossible, but we could never get to the end of the universe because it's expanding faster than the speed of light. But you ever like have something happen and you're like, yo, like this happened before or whatever? But again, that's like a whole nother combo. But yeah, in the case that you minister, he said that, and I realized like, that's how we really, you know, gonna get this freedom. Because it's like, you know, we all know the people that sat down and created the United States, the Constitution of the United States were all white. And so by default, whether it was done literally or not, it's going to be biased towards a specific group. So who created these operating systems? You know, there's meetings being held in Geneva with Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Elon Musk, and they're not talking about AI. You know, they're creating something called Open AI, which is basically a decentralized AI platform so that it can't fall in one government. Now that's dope. But again, it's like sovereignty from the British Empire.
Right.
Where we're being taxed so much, we're going to go form our own nation.
Right.
You know what I mean? It wasn't done to the benefit of, you even read, you mentioned, you know, freedom of liberty, pursuit, and happiness earlier. You know, we have an amendment that says all people are free unless they commit a crime.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have so many people in prison. Literally, there's an amendment, I think it's the 11th, is that
13th.
The 13th, sorry, the 13th Amendment, which basically still enacts and forms on people to be enslaved in a system.
And not to interrupt you, but I was listening to Dr. Claude Anderson, and he said that it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of property at first, and they changed it to happiness because the property they was talking about us, only us.
So now think about in the case of think about Obama coming up saying, I want to change the Constitution of the United States. Like, who you think you are? You know? And so that's the same way I look at technology. Now technology has no room for it to be biased. Why? Because it's a universal language, just like music and art. It can't be biased. It's accepted, it's a universal language. Our ancestors had technology far way beyond what we have today. Absolutely, I know that for a fact. You know, you look at even the ancient Egyptians and how they could use these urns and put juices in it to form electricity. You know, so none of this is new, but we're given one way. Like next month, I'm going to Ghana. I'm building a school. I like to call it a research lab, an innovation lab. And I remember 2 years ago when I started even thinking about this, I was like, I want to take minimalism and essentialism and all these ism words of design and take it there. And I said, I talk about empowering Africa, and I talk about empowering the continent, and talk about empowering black people. Why am I taking a European design aesthetic to the motherland and build things on that? What's the difference between that? You know what I mean? What's the difference between that and colonialism? You know, or gentrification? You know, going out, influencing external sources, thinking that could benefit the community. So I'm like, nah, we're going to go study the indigenous people. We're going to hold off on building the school till we do our research on the indigenous people and how can we fuse what they have with the knowledge we have to form these prefab homes. So we make like pre-installed homes and you could just attach them in their modular and you could combine them together. You know, all of these different things for the school.
It brings me to a point of, it brings me to several points. You mentioned so much to get my mind firing. But white patriarchal intellect, and in the context of how it deals with, we're living in someone else's mind. When we're not the designers, we're not the architects, we're living in someone else's design. The way that the glass is set up, the ceilings, the color, these squares, all of this is someone else's design. And most of the design in white patriarchal intellect is for control and power. You know, it's to put your mind into a box, a captive state of thinking. Nature doesn't design in straight lines. So when you're talking about that, if you look at, and I was studying about black architecture and black designers, and I just started looking up some really dope-ass buildings that I didn't know were black designed. But you wouldn't know until you actually go study. You'd be like, whoa, a black person designed this, a black person did this Notre Dame thing, this thing over here. You're like, this is amazing, but what you notice is a trend that we don't design in straight lines. We design in a much more creative capacity. If you think about like Wakanda, right, and how they have that science lab and graffiti on there, that's how we design something. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be boxed in. It wouldn't be square, cubicle chambers. You know what I mean? And I think about that even in when you talk about the Constitution and the iOS and what we're using to operate off of, we're not operating off of our evolution, we're operating off of the accumulation of theirs. So if you can take something like Tesla and Elon Musk, right? You can take something like the Wright brothers and Leonardo da Vinci. What you see right there is you see documentation of their learning curve, and you see an accumulation of knowledge. That's basically what evolution is.